Welcome, dreamers, to the realm where time whispers its secrets through the silence of midnight glass. Beneath the weight of centuries, nestled in the shadows of an empire long faded, lies a vessel that defies understanding. A cup no larger than two hands held in reverence, yet holding within it a mystery vast as time itself. Tonight, we gaze into the Lycurgus Cup, not merely a relic but a whisper of lost knowledge, a chalice of shifting colors that dances between green and red, as though stirred by unseen spirits. Fashioned in the heart of Imperial Rome, its surface reflects not only light, but the forgotten whispers of ancient science, for hidden within its glass are particles so small they speak the language of atoms, of nanotechnology, long before the word had formed. Close your eyes and imagine the corridors of the Roman night, candles flickering across marble columns, robes whispering against mosaic floors, and there, in the hush of a sacred chamber, a cup that knows your presence, one that glows in hues unseen by day. Before we embark on this journey through time's most delicate mysteries, if these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing to continue these nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you join in tonight's contemplation. Let the global community of history's mysteries connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. Now, breathe gently, let your body grow still, and listen. As the past begins to speak, let us enter the world of the Lycurgus Cup, in the heart of the ancient city, when the Tiber whispered softly beneath marble bridges, and the air still carried the incense of imperial rituals. A strange glow flickered in the depth of a noble chamber, the kind of light that one does not simply see, but feels. It shimmered in hues both crimson and emerald, shifting like breath upon water. There upon a carved pedestal of porphyry stone sat a cup, a vessel of such delicacy and wonder that those who looked upon it felt the urge to speak in hushed tones, as if addressing a deity. The Lycurgus Cup no one knew, in that time, to call it by that name. Names are the gift of hindsight, and mysteries are always most vibrant when unnamed. But the vessel existed, cradled in the hands of Rome's artisans, and cherished by those who understood, if not its mechanism, at least its magic. Rome, in its imperial twilight, still held the world in its grasp. From the misted forests of Britannia to the golden dunes of Egypt, its legions marched, and its symbols endured. But beneath the grandeur, behind the facades of triumphal arches and sculpted domes, there pulsed a quieter kind of knowledge, a knowing that moved not with swords or laws, but with the art of the hand and the intuition of the eye. In the glass workshops of Alexandria and Antioch, artisans whispered secrets passed from tongue to ear over generations, recipes for color that could not be described, techniques that relied more on breath and instinct than on diagrams. It was here, in such a forgotten workshop, that the Lycurgus Cup was likely born, not merely blown or molded, but coaxed into being. Every curve of its form, every figure within its cage-like lattice, told a story of ancient harmony. But more than the beauty of its design was the enigma of its glow. By daylight, the cup was a cool green, like forest shadows on jade. But when lit from within, when the light passed through it instead of upon it, it transformed. The green dissolved, and in its place bloomed a deep red, rich as pomegranate flesh, dark as blood beneath a torch's glow. And this, dear dreamer, was no accident. Long before the world understood particles, before the language of molecules and ions had been woven into the human tongue, the artisans of Rome had stumbled upon a secret that modern minds would come to call nanotechnology. Hidden in the very fabric of the Lycurgus Cup were particles of gold and silver, ground so fine they danced with light in impossible ways. They absorbed, scattered, and refracted in a manner so precise that even the keenest minds of today struggled to replicate it. Yet to the Romans it was alchemy of spirit, an echo of the divine. The cup itself is a masterpiece of what is known as cage cup design, a rare and intricate style where an outer layer of carved glass surrounds an inner vessel, both fused yet separate. On its outer surface, the tale of King Lycurgus is etched in high relief, a myth wrapped in vines and torment. Lycurgus, the king who dared defy Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy. In wrath, the god ensnared him in vines, driving him to madness, a myth of punishment and pride, of resistance and divine consequence. The figures are dynamic, almost breathing, frozen mid-motion, as if their agony has been paused in time. But why this tale? Why this king? Perhaps it is not the myth alone that matters, but the theme it embodies: transformation, madness, the crossing of boundaries between mortal and divine. Just as the cup changes with light, so too does Lycurgus's fate twist with his choices. Perhaps those who first held this vessel were not merely admiring a story in glass, but contemplating the thin veil between what is seen and what is known, what is believed and what is true. The cup, then, becomes more than artifact. It becomes oracle. Imagine, for a moment, A Roman banquet. Torches flicker on alabaster walls. Musicians pluck gently on lutes, and the scent of roasted figs fills the air. A nobleman raises the Lycurgus Cup to the light. It glows red in his hand, and a hush falls over the gathering. A murmur of awe. Is it witchcraft? Is it the favor of the gods? Or is it simply, quietly, the echo of a forgotten science? In a world ruled by symbolism, the power of such a transformation cannot be overstated. Color was not mere decoration. It was meaning. Red was life and sacrifice. Green was fertility and rebirth. That one object could shift between the two was more than cleverness. It was magic. And yet, even in its time, the cup was unique. Other cage cups exist. Yes, fragments and examples have survived, buried beneath layers of ash and dust. But none behave quite like this. None respond to light with the same subtle intelligence. None hold within them the silent presence of gold and silver at the edge of vision. Modern scholars discovered its secret only with the advent of electron microscopes, only with the patience of quiet minds staring into the very skin of the cup. They found nanoparticles, flecks of metal smaller than light's own wavelength, embedded in the glass matrix, unseen by ancient eyes, yet crucial to the phenomenon. Was it deliberate? That question drifts like incense through every lecture, and every paper written on the Lycurgus Cup. Did the Roman craftsmen know what they were doing? Did they intend this miracle? Or was it the divine accident of trial and error refined by centuries of inherited craft? The answer may never be found. And perhaps, in truth, it does not matter, for the mystery itself is the lesson. The silence of unknowing invites contemplation. It opens a space where we can stand, thousands of years later, and feel connected not by fact, but by wonder. As the Roman Empire swelled and fractured, as emperors rose and fell beneath the weight of laurel and iron, this cup endured, passed from hand to hand, perhaps hidden in times of strife, perhaps displayed in temples, or used only under the gaze of stars. Eventually it vanished from the world's gaze, buried beneath the sediment of centuries, not discovered again until modern times, when it would enter the collection of the British Museum, its mystery intact. And so, dreamer, we return to the chamber of light, where a cup sits still, yet alive, where a story carved in myth dances with particles unseen, the Lycurgus Cup, a chalice of time, a mirror of color, a whisper of a forgotten science that speaks not in equations, but in the hush between candlelight and breath. As you drift into the depths of this tale, know this: there are more wonders ahead, more chambers to explore. The Lycurgus Cup is only the beginning. Let us step deeper into its legacy. When you're ready, say continue to proceed to. In the shadowed workshops of antiquity, where flame was both tool and spirit, the story of the Lycurgus Cup began not as art, but as ritual. The making of glass was no mundane craft to the ancients. It was alchemy in motion. Fire, earth, and breath intertwined to form something that captured the intangible. Light made still, color made solid. These workshops were temples in their own right, beneath vaulted ceilings streaked with soot and lit by the dull orange of furnaces. Artisans worked in silence and song, each movement rehearsed through generations, each recipe for pigment held like sacred scripture. There was no handbook, no manual to follow. Knowledge lived in the hands, passed from master to apprentice not in words, but in the rhythm of the flame. In such a place, somewhere in the late 4th century, a fragment of eternity was born. The Lycurgus Cup did not arise from accident alone. It was born of tradition, of accumulated intuition. Roman glassmakers had long understood the subtleties of their medium. They could coax deep cobalt blues from copper, vivid yellows from lead and soothing greens from iron. They could fashion translucent layers, blow intricate forms, and carve delicate reliefs with the patience of those who sculpt light itself. But what emerged in the cup was different. It was not merely beautiful, it was alive. And it is here, in the furnace room of time, that we begin to understand the quiet genius of the Roman artisan. The Lycurgus Cup required 2 miracles. First, the delicate art of cage cup construction, 2 layers of glass, the outer carved away with impossible precision to leave only a filigree of figures dancing around the inner core. Second, and more mysterious still, the integration of microscopic particles of gold and silver into the glass itself. This process, unknown to the maker in its full theoretical scope, was achieved through a kind of poetic instinct. Metal filings dissolved in solutions. Suspensions stirred not by formula, but by feel. The result, a colloid of noble metals suspended in molten silica, their distribution precise enough to manipulate light at the quantum level. We may call it nanotechnology now, but then it was something sacred. Imagine the artisan, crouched before the furnace, the sweat of his labor mingling with the scent of burning wood and molten sand. He holds a rod tipped with glowing glass, not yet a vessel, but a promise, he adds. The mysterious powder stirs with care, and as the heat fuses metal to matrix, something in the glow shifts. A shimmer not of color, but of presence. The glass begins to sing in a different key. He does not know why, not entirely, but he knows enough to listen. Once formed, The vessel cools in darkness wrapped in straw and wool. Days pass. Then the carving begins. Hours stretch into weeks as figures emerge. The wrathful king, the creeping vine, the tranquil god. Their forms grow from the surface like myth from memory. When finished, the vessel is more than complete. It is awakened. But to whom was it offered? Here, the trail grows misted with speculation. The Lycurgus Cup was too refined for common use, too unique to be part of an imperial set. Some believe it was a gift, perhaps to a senator, perhaps to a temple. Others suspect it served in rituals too secret to record. There is no inscription, no record of its commissioning. Only the glass remains, silent and eternal. Still, its very subject, the myth of Lycurgus, offers clues. The story is older than Rome, echoing from the roots of Greek myth. Lycurgus, king of the Edonians in Thrace, sought to suppress the worship of Dionysus. He scorned the wild rituals, the ecstatic frenzy, the sacred madness that the god brought. But Dionysus, insulted and unyielding, struck back. He drove the king to madness, entwining him in vines and visions until his rule crumbled and his name was cursed. This tale, carved in crimson and emerald, may have served as a warning, a reflection on power and pride. Or perhaps, more subtly, it celebrated the inevitability of transformation. Just as the king was changed, so too did the cup change in the light. What appears stable may, under pressure, reveal a hidden truth. It is not difficult to see the metaphor extended to empire itself. In the 4th century, Rome teetered on the edge of change. The Christian faith had taken root, reshaping the religious landscape. Pagan rituals faded, temples fell silent, and with them, the old gods withdrew into story. Perhaps the cup was a relic of this transition, a symbol of the last golden age of classical myth, infused with all the light and shadow of a fading world. It is easy, from our distant vantage, to imagine the cup being passed between generations, carried by fleeing noble families, buried for safekeeping, hidden during times of war, always glowing when touched by flame, always silent in the dark, until at last, centuries later, it was unearthed, not in Rome, but in a distant land, its journey obscured by the folds of time. When the Lycurgus Cup entered the modern world, it did so almost without fail. First studied as a curious antiquus, it was only in the 20th century that its true nature began to reveal itself. Scientists peering into its glass with electron microscopes discovered the impossible. Particles of gold and silver, embedded in the matrix, smaller than the wavelength of visible light. These particles, they learned, did not merely color the glass, they manipulated light itself. When illuminated from behind, the cup's structure scattered shorter wavelengths, allowing only the longer red hues to pass through. When lit from the front, the effect reversed, a shift not of pigment, but of physics. And yet, it had been made without those equations, without knowledge of electromagnetic theory, without even a name for the atom. That is the question that hangs in the air like incense. Was it truly accidental, the result of generations of trial and error refined into perfection? Or did the ancient world hold a knowledge now lost, not in textbooks or temples, but in the gestures of the hand, the rituals of the workshop, the mysteries of the artisan's breath? There are no answers in the museum labels, no parchment preserved with the recipe, only the cup, resting beneath a pane of glass, glowing softly under the artificial lights. And yet, even there, it whispers. Perhaps this is what makes the Lycurgus Cup so powerful. Not merely its beauty, or its age, or its technological marvel, but its silence, its refusal to explain itself. It stands as a question, elegant, patient, eternal, and in that question lies its power to soothe the restless mind, to remind us, in a world driven by noise and certainty, that some truths remain gently unknown. That wonder, once kindled, does not need resolution. So let the light flicker. Let the cup remain a mystery. Let us sit with it a while longer, beside the flame, where glass becomes memory, and memory becomes dream. When you are ready, say, continue, and we shall proceed. As we drift further into the stillness of antiquity, let us return to a time when color was not simply a hue, but a voice, a language woven into every surface, every wall, every vessel. In the world of ancient Rome, color was alive. It had meaning, breath, and power. To understand the Lycurgus Cup, we must first understand how the ancients saw color, not with the detachment of science, but with the intimacy of spirit. Red was more than pigment. It was blood and victory. Life and death, it marks the robes of generals, the lips of statues, the flames of devotion. Green was not merely the color of fields. It was renewal, youth, and rebirth. The fresh scent of spring vines, the drapery of Venus, the sacred balance of nature's cycle. In this sacred language of light, the Lycurgus Cup was more than beautiful. It was articulate. For those who gathered in Roman temples, light played upon the marbled statues of gods and goddesses, bouncing from golden domes, falling in soft beams through arched ceilings. The rituals of the old religion now faded into myth, was saturated in such shades. In these sacred spaces, light and glass danced together. The priests, wrapped in linen dyed with rare minerals, moved through clouds of incense, their gestures slow and purposeful, every color chosen, every flicker of flame designed to reveal more than could be seen with the eyes alone. Into such a world, the Lycurgus Cup must have entered not as a mere drinking vessel, but as a consecrated object, not holy in the sense of scripture, but sacred in its ability to summon. Its colors, shifting with the presence of fire, were themselves a rite, a transformation before the transformation, a mirror of the soul's passage from one state into another. One can imagine the rituals: a cup placed upon an altar, unlit, prayers whispered in forgotten Latin, the strike of flint, a single flame kindled, and then the glow from within the cup, a red so deep it seemed to bleed, as if the myth of Lycurgus carved around its surface were igniting into life, as if Dionysus himself, god of the vine and veil, was stepping from the shadows of the story, his vines creeping along the edge of the altar. There would have been silence there, not from ignorance, but reverence, because to the ancient world, such moments were not entertainment. They were thresholds, places where the boundary between the seen and the unseen grew thin. We cannot know the exact rites that surrounded the cup. We cannot know whose hands lit it first, whose breath caught in awe at the first shimmer of color. But we can guess, from the symbolism, from the craft, from the echoes left in myth and material, that this was not merely an object of wealth, but of transition. The transition from light to shadow, from green to red, from mortal to divine. To see color shift in such a precise, profound way would have suggested, to Roman minds, an inner soul within the object, that the cup was not simply reacting, but responding, that it held within it some essence of awareness. After all, was that not what the gods did? Shift forms, conceal their true nature, and then reveal themselves only to those who dared to look deeply. In the cults of mystery, of Dionysus, of Isis, of Mithras, initiation was often marked by revelations that transcended language, light and darkness, silence and sound. Visions kindled by torches in underground chambers. Perhaps the Lycurgus Cup found its place in one of these rites, passed hand to hand, lit from within, a symbol of the initiate's own transformation. Imagine being there, in a vaulted chamber beneath the streets of Rome, surrounded by flickering lamplight, the scent of wine and myrrh thick in the air, a circle of figures in silence. At the center, the cup, green in stillness, red in flame. You hold it, it glows in your hand, warm and strange. And something within you shifts too. Even now, long after such rituals have crumbled into dust, the sensation remains. Those who view the cup in the quiet halls of the museum, those who stand before its glass case and see its glow beneath, the lights report a kind of stillness, a hush not caused by reverence for history, but by something else, a recognition, a flicker of ancient memory. It is as though the cup speaks, not in language, but in light, not in facts, but in feeling. And this is where our understanding of the past begins to deepen. For the Lycurgus Cup is not merely an example of Roman craftsmanship. It is a doorway, a portal into how the ancients saw their world, not with sterile logic, but with layered mystery. They lived in a world where objects had spirit, where rituals infused matter with meaning, where every shift in light was a message from the gods. The mystery of the cup is not just in how it changes color, but in what that change once meant, what it stirred in the hearts of those who saw it, what stories they told themselves. As the green gave way to red, perhaps they saw it as a living metaphor, perhaps they saw it as a warning, perhaps they saw, in that shifting light, a mirror of their own lives, stable one moment, transformed the next. For Rome itself was such a vessel, a city of marble and fire, of a republican empire, of gods worshipped and then forgotten. It, too, shimmered between states, between glory and ruin, between light and shadow. And just as the Lycurgus Cup endured, so too did the mysteries it held. We now speak of nanoparticles, of colloids and surface plasma and resonance, but none of those terms can capture the stillness of a room when that light changes. None of them explain the sensation that this object, somehow, is aware of you, that it waits for the light to awaken it. And so, we return once more to the altar of color, to a time when rituals lived in light, when a cup could become a cosmos, and when silence, not explanation, was the highest form of understanding. Let us remain in that silence a little longer. When you are ready to continue, say continue, and we will step into. In the twilight of the Roman Empire, when shadows grew long over marble roads and the old gods whispered their farewells, a quiet disappearance began, not of armies or emperors, but of hands, the hands that once shaped the empire's soul through craft, through beauty, through knowledge passed from palm to palm like fire and darkness. The artisans, they were the silent architects of Rome's radiance, the unseen sculptors of its while generals marched and orators thundered, It was these men and women who laid mosaic floors, who carved marble gods, who blew glass into celestial forms. And among them, somewhere along the empire's arteries of trade and tradition, were those who shaped the Lycurgus Cup. Their names are lost. Their voices do not survive in scrolls or speeches. They did not write at their techniques. They had no guilds that endured beyond the fall. Their knowledge moved differently, not through written doctrine, but through presence. A child beside a master, a gesture, a breath held at the edge of the flame. But as Rome began to crumble beneath the weight of its own enormity, the world that nurtured these artisans began to dissolve. The northern provinces grew restless. Trade routes faltered. Patronage shifted from temples to churches, and the sacred spaces where beauty had once flourished began to change their function. Stone by stone, the old forums fell silent. Workshops closed. Kilns cooled for the last time. It is easy to imagine a final moment. A master glass maker, aged and gray, stands before his furnace one last evening. His apprentices have gone. The orders have ceased. And he looks upon his tools, the rods, the molds, the crucibles blackened by years of flame, with a gaze not of sorrow, but of surrender. He knows the craft will not outlive him. Not in the way it once had. Not in its fullness. He may light the fire one more time. He may shape one last vessel. But the lineage ends with him. And thus, the knowledge that once made the Lycurgus Cup possible began to slip, like sand through tired fingers, not lost in a single night, but dimmed slowly, subtly, until it became legend. We speak often of the fall of Rome as a political story, a narrative of borders and battles, of barbarians and bureaucracy. But it's true, fading was quieter. It happened in the homes of weavers, the studios of painters, the glassworks of dreamers. The empire did not vanish. It fell asleep, and with it, the dreams of its artisans. Some of their works remain, buried beneath the soil of collapsing cities, walled within forgotten villas, scattered across the trade routes like seeds. The Lycurgus Cup is one such seed, a fossil of excellence, a memory in glass. By the time of the early medieval period, few remembered how to carve. Fewer still knew how to produce dichroic glass, the kind that changes color with the light. Even the very concept had grown distant. People saw such objects and attributed them to magic, to miracles, to saints rather than smiths. In some remote corners of the world, fragments of the old knowledge endured. The Byzantine Empire carried embers of Roman technique, especially in mosaic and gold. In Islamic lands, glassmaking would eventually flower again with innovations all their own. But the particular blend of art, myth, and mysterious science that shaped the Lycurgus Cup had no true heir. Its method was unrecorded, its essence It would be more than 1,000 years before humanity once again held glass to the light and asked it to speak in such shifting tongues. And this, dear dreamer, is the wonder, that something so delicate survived when entire empires did not, that a vessel, not a building or a city, but a simple cup carried within it the fingerprint of a vanished world. A world where the spiritual and the scientific were not enemies, but twins. Where beauty was not decoration, but revelation. Where light itself was sacred, and those who shaped it were revered, not for power, but for wisdom. When modern scholars gaze into the Lycurgus Cup, what they truly see is a question. How could such a thing have been made? And more poignantly, why can we no longer make it? In laboratories and universities, replicas have been attempted. Using lasers, electron beams, and nanometer-scale measurements, scientists can now create glass that shifts from green to red, mimicking the ancient effect. But it is costly, it is difficult, and it lacks something. Soul. The modern reproductions can imitate the color, but not the mystery. They do not carry the myths of kings and gods carved into their walls. They do not emerge from kilns lit by olive wood fire, from hands stained with ash and reverence. They do not hum with the silence of a forgotten ritual, or reflect the gaze of a world that saw divinity in every shade of light. They are echoes, faithful, perhaps, but hollow. The original, resting quietly behind glass, remains unsurpassed. It is this silence, this unreplicated magic, that makes the Lycurgus Cup not just a marvel of craftsmanship, but a monument to the passage of knowing, a monument to what is lost, not when cities fall, but when the hands that remember no longer shape the world. Let us honor those hands now, the nameless artisans who stood by firelight and coaxed wonder from sand, who did not ask for fame, only for the quiet perfection of the work, who saw in their glass not merely function, but eternity. They are gone, but their breath lingers in the cup. When you hold the light behind it and see the red bloom within, you are seeing through their eyes. You are seeing the soul of a vanished world. Let us rest here, in that remembrance. When you are ready, say, continue, and we shall walk into. Beneath the carved vines of the Lycurgus Cup stirs a presence both wild and eternal. His face is not plainly shown, but his spirit wins through the glass like smoke through a temple. Dionysus, god of wine, of madness, of ecstasy and divine disruption. is the unspoken soul of the cup. His myth is not merely decoration, but invocation. A whisper wrapped around glass, a shadow nestled within the firelight. To understand the Lycurgus Cup is to understand Dionysus, not as a cheerful reveler as later paintings would reduce him, but as something older, darker, and more elemental. In the ancient world, Dionysus was not merely a god of pleasure. He was the god of transformation, of the places where reason dissolved into mystery. He came from the east, they said, from beyond the orderly lands, a stranger god who wore no crown of gold, but of ivy, who carried not a scepter, but a thyrsus, a wand of fennel wrapped in vine, tipped with a pinnacum sacred to those who walked at night. Dionysus was a force that entered the soul and unmade it, not to destroy but to rebuild. His rites were not for the faint-hearted. In groves and glades, by torchlight and drum, his followers surrendered to something beyond the mind. They danced, they cried, they became more than human for a time, and in that shedding of structure, they found truth. King Lycurgus, whose figure writhes upon the cup's surface, rejected this truth. He sought to ban Dionysus, to expel his worship to enforce control upon that which was meant to run wild. And so he was punished, not with the sword, but with the vine, not with death, but with madness. In the carvings that encircle the Lycurgus Cup, we see this myth etched in high relief. Lycurgus, crowned and frantic, reaches forward as if to strike. Around him, tendrils of vine coil upward, grasping his limbs. Nymphs flee or twist away in terror. One figure, identified by scholars as Ambrosia, appears to dissolve into the curling foliage, her body becoming tree, bark, leaf. It is a scene of divine retribution, but also of metamorphosis. Just as the glass shifts from green to red, so does the myth shift from warning to wisdom. Dionysus is not merely punishing, he is revealing, showing the king what lies beneath his crown, a fear of the uncontrollable, a fear of becoming. The cup, then, is more than a container. It is a theater. Every time it is turned in the hand, another moment of the myth comes alive. The figures are not symmetrical. They do not form a closed circle, but a spiral, a movement, a journey, from denial to madness, from rigidity to release. We do not know who chose this story to be carved in glass, but it was no random selection. In the late Roman world, as the old gods faded and the new order rose, Dionysus lingered in the shadows. He was difficult to erase. His rites had already moved underground, into mystery schools and private cults. His power had never been about temples or statues. It was internal. It was the part of the human soul that resisted containment. To see his myth preserved in this cup is to glimpse a lingering ember of resistance. Even as churches rose and crosses replaced laurel, there were still those who remembered, who whispered the names of forgotten gods, who understood that Dionysus, like the cup itself, changed form when the light changed. Perhaps the cup's glow, green in the calm, red in the fire, was seen as the god's breath, a living echo of the divine. There is poetry in that. The very material of the cup glass infused with unseen particles reflects Dionysus's essence. What appears one way in daylight becomes something else in the torchlight. What is stable becomes fluid. What is known becomes myth. The ancients understood this fluidity. Their gods wore many faces. Their stories twisted like rivers, never still, always flowing. Dionysus especially defied containment. He could be gentle and terrifying, joyous and wrathful, man and god, light and shadow. And the Lycurgus Cup holds that ambiguity in perfect silence. It does not explain itself. It simply is. It invites the viewer into a contemplative state, where meaning is not handed down but uncovered, where the story must be felt rather than decoded. This is the heart of mystery. In the ancient world, to undergo a mystery rite was not to learn new facts. It was to see the same world with different eyes, to drink a potion and realize it was not the potion that changed, but the drinker, to stand before a sacred object and feel it stir something unnamed within. The Lycurgus Cup offers such a moment when held before light, not artificial light, but flame. It awakens, and those who see it are no longer spectators. They are participants in the myth. In this way, Dionysus still walks among us, not in the vineyards or festivals, but in the questions we cannot answer, in the things we cannot explain, in the moments when beauty overrides logic, when silence becomes wisdom, when a piece of glass, centuries old, breathes with present. This is not superstition. It is awareness that the world is not flat, that objects can hold memories, that art can become altar. The Lycurgus Cup, with its vein-entangled myth, reminds us of the sacredness of transformation, of the necessity of losing one's form in order to find one's truth. Let us pause here, dreamer, in the presence of the god who cannot be pinned down. Let the light flicker. Let the story be both known and unknowable. Dionysus waits in the shadows still, in the vast chambers of ancient Rome, where golden rays filtered through oculus and arch, where mosaics glistened like frozen stars upon temple floors. Light was never simple, it was sacred. It was sculpted, curated, and revered. The Romans, though lacking our modern theories of optics, understood light not only as illumination, but as spirit. They built with it, painted with it, worshipped in it, and in rare and wondrous moments, they captured it. The Lycurgus Cup is not just a story of glass and myth. It is a poem of light, a moment in history where human hands caught radiance and held it still. It is a chalice forged not only from silica and flame, but from the very breath of color itself. The magic begins with the materials. The Romans were not strangers to glass. By the height of their empire, glassmaking had become one of the most sophisticated crafts in the Mediterranean world. Windows, flasks, amphorae, and decorative objects adorned villas from Carthage to Cologne. But the cup we contemplate tonight belonged to a different tradition, one not of utility, but of alchemical elegance. To change color as light passes through, it is no ordinary feat. It is not the result of dyes or stains. It is not paint. It is not overlay. It is the deep marriage between light and matter, where the structure of the glass itself becomes a participant in vision. Inside the Lycurgus Cup are particles of gold and silver, each no larger than a virus. They are suspended within the glass, not coated upon it. These particles interact with light in a way invisible to the naked eye, but profound in its effect. Depending on how light strikes them, whether from behind or from the front, different wavelengths are absorbed, scattered, or allowed through. This phenomenon is known today as surface plasmon resonance. But to the ancients, it was sorcery, not in the sense of spells or incantations, but in that deeper sense of sacred mystery, of encountering a phenomenon so precise, so inexplicably that it evokes reverence rather than curiosity. And what makes it all the more mysterious is this: they did not understand the science, yet they achieved it. This is what we call intuitive alchemy. The Romans knew how to combine certain materials in precise proportions. They knew which ashes and minerals to add, which temperatures to maintain, and how long to anneal the final form. These decisions were not guided by laboratories, but by memory, by tradition, by what one might call a spiritual science. Each workshop guarded its recipes like temple relics, the proportions of natron to silica, the time a crucible should glow before it was ready, the rhythm of breath when blowing a vessel. These were learned not through instruction, but immersion. The apprentice learned to hear the language of the furnace, to see when a mixture shimmered just right, to know, without knowing why, that the balance had been struck. Somewhere, in this dance of trial and ritual, the Lycurgus Cup was born. Its colors are not uniform. They shimmer with slight variation. Veins of deeper hue, patches of softened glow. This is no flaw, this is breath. This is what tells us it was shaped by hands, not machines. When light passes through the cup and reveals the rich, glowing red of its interior world, one does not feel that something is happening. One feels that something is awakening, and perhaps that is exactly what the ancients intended. Light, in Roman religion, was a medium of the divine. Flames burned before statues not to provide warmth, but to summon presence. Oil lamps flickered beside tombs to guide the soul. The sun itself was Sol Invictus, the unconquered god, whose rays blessed emperors and peasants alike. To harness that light, to capture its essence in an object, was to bring the divine close. The Lycurgus Cup may have been such an attempt, not to worship light, but to converse with it. To make a cup that changed with fire was to make a chalice that responded to spirit. Green in calm, red in passion, green in reason, red in ecstasy. Like Dionysus, whose myth it holds, the cup defies constancy. It asks not to be understood, but to be witnessed. And this is the soul of ancient alchemy. Not the pursuit of gold, but the transformation of matter into meaning. The idea that objects can be transmuted, not just in form, but in purpose. That lead can become spirit. That glass can become light. That the physical can be imbued with the metaphysical. Alchemy was not science then, nor was it superstition. It was reverence made practical. The furnace became altar. The artisan became priest. Each act of shaping was an invocation. Each breath blown into molten glass was a prayer. And when the cup emerged still glowing, it was not merely a thing. It was a presence. A vessel not only of wine, but of wonder. The Lycurgus Cup, in this sense, is not just a relic of Roman ingenuity. It is a relic of Roman soul. We who live now, in a world lit by electricity and overwhelmed by explanation, are unaccustomed to such things. We are taught to ask why, to dissect, to replicate, and in that pursuit, we gain much precision, consistency, knowledge, but we lose something too. The quiet awe of not knowing, the hush that falls when color shifts, the sense that light, when caught in the right vessel, can become voice. So let us, if only for a moment, return to that other way of seeing. Let us imagine the artisans by firelight, the first time they saw the red bloom from within the green. Let us imagine their silence, their eyes wide, their breath held, not because they understood it, but because they did not. And in that mystery, they found the sacred. Let us remain here for a time, in the glow of alchemical light. The cup before us, the fire flickering low, the air thick with wonder. In the great span between the mortal and the divine, between matter and meaning, there are bridges not made of stone or wood, but of silence, myth, and form. The Lycurgus Cup is such a bridge. It is a vessel, yes, one that could have once held wine, or a sacred liquid, or perhaps simply light itself. But more than that, it is a vessel between worlds, between the world of the ancients and the world of those who still dream. For what is a vessel, if not an invitation? The shape of the cup is not extravagant. It is modest, cylindrical, its dimensions carefully balanced. It does not scream for attention. It waits. It draws the gaze only when light finds it, only when the fire's breath stirs its secret colors awake. There is wisdom in this restraint. In the ancient world, objects were not always made to impress, but to serve as companions in ritual. The Lycurgus Cup, with its mythic imagery and dichroic soul, would not have been brought out casually. It would have rested in darkness, protected, wrapped perhaps in cloth embroidered with signs, awaiting its moment. And when that moment came, when the light was struck, it did not perform. It is easy to imagine the cup as a kind of threshold. Those who looked into it, who turned it in their hands and saw the green shift to red, were looking into more than pigment. They were gazing into a liminal space, a place not entirely of this world. Ancient rituals often required objects like this, items that marked the transition from one state of being to another. The anointing oil, the sacred flame, the mask worn by initiates. The Lycurgus Cup may have served a similar role, not as a magical tool, but as a silent witness, a vessel to hold the moment of crossing, between youth and age, between ignorance and understanding, between the seen and the unseen. The myth carved upon its surface is not linear. It does not tell a clear story. It evokes one Lycurgus struggles. The vines tighten, the divine presence looms. But there is no resolution, no tidy end. It is, in a way, a mirror, a depiction of what happens when the mortal mind confronts something it cannot control. Dionysus was not the god of chaos. He was the god of surrender, of letting go the structures that no longer served, of allowing the self to dissolve, so something more ancient, more eternal, could emerge. And the cup, in its glowing transformation, echoes that. When viewed in daylight, it is calm, noble, restrained. Green as a patrician's garden, ordered and cool, but when touched by inner flame, it transforms, becomes wild, passionate, deep red, the color of blood, of wine, of revelation. It is not destroyed by this change, it becomes itself. This is why the Lycurgus Cup is not simply an artifact, but a rite. To look upon it is to participate in that journey. In a sense, all sacred vessels are metaphors. The chalice of the Eucharist, the grail of medieval longing, the libation bowl of the Greek hero. They do not only hold liquid, they hold meaning, they give form to the ineffable. The Lycurgus Cup stands in that lineage. Its mystery is not just in how it was made, but in how it makes us feel, how it makes us stop, breathe, wonder. It carries within it the tension between opposites, order and frenzy, green and red, logic and myth. And in doing so, it reflects the human soul, always shifting between these poles. In our modern age, we often seek to categorize, to label, but the cup resists such efforts. It is not entirely art, nor entirely science. It is not merely religious, nor entirely secular. It sits instead between categories. Like twilight, like dream, it reminds us that some truths are felt, not known. That some beauty lies in the that some vessels do not need to be filled to be full. The fact that the Lycurgus Cup still exists, unbroken, whole, and radiant, is itself a miracle. It has crossed centuries, empires, ideologies. It has survived fires, floods, and forget. It has watched the world change around it, and remained unchanged. And yet, it does change. With light, with your gaze, with the turning of the flame. It meets each moment anew, like a companion from the ancient world who still speaks, if only you are quiet enough to listen. This is the essence of a vessel between worlds. It does not belong to the past. It does not live entirely in the present. It moves between. It welcomes the seeker, the dreamer, the one who wonders. It asks no questions. It answers no questions. It simply glows, and in that glow, there is everything. Let us linger here, with the cup in the quiet. Let us hold the mystery gently, as one holds the light between one's hands. Beneath the grand colonnades and triumphal arches of the Roman Empire, where the weight of stone was matched only by the ambition of conquest, shadows gathered, not sinister shadows, but contemplative ones. Quiet recesses where the glories of Rome gave way to its secrets. These were not the places of senators or soldiers, but of scribes, sages, and craftsmen. And it is here, in these dimly lit corridors of forgotten labor, that the Lycurgus Cup was born. For all its grandeur, Rome was a world of contrasts. It celebrated control and order in its laws, its roads, its legions, But beneath that surface pulsed a fascination with the mysterious, the invisible, the divine. It worshipped gods whose names changed with the winds of empire. It held festivals that blurred the line between the sacred and the wild. It built temples above ground and tunnels below. In these places, the storerooms thick with incense and dust, the empire's hidden soul took shape. The Lycurgus Cup likely emerged not from the opulent palaces of the elite, but from the hands of those who moved between worlds, skilled artisans who understood the language of fire and the behavior of molten sand. These were not men of wealth, but of knowledge. Knowledge not written in scrolls, but traced in gesture, in ritual, in the way the wrist turns as glass begins to cool. They did not speak of surface plasma and resonance. They did not know the word nap, but they knew the feel of it. The way the glass changed when a dusting of certain metals was stirred in just the right way. The way light seemed to pause, hesitate, then slip through differently. These were men who observed the universe through their tools, who studied the flame not to control it, but to collaborate with it. And as they worked, they were watched, not only by apprentices but by statues in alcoves, by mosaics of gods and monsters, by the ever-present presence of myth. In these spaces, the scientific and the sacred were not divided. The workshop was a chapel. The act of creation was reverent. One can imagine such a workshop beneath a villa or behind a temple wall. Light from high-set windows spilling over tables laden with powders, minerals, half-finished vessels. The air rich with smoke and oil. Silence broken only by the hum of bellows and the gentle tap of chisel on cooled glass. Here the Lycurgus Cup would have taken form. First the inner vessel, smooth, uniform, awaiting its companion. Then the outer shell, thicker, destined to be carved away until the figures emerged like dreams from stone. And all the while, the artisan watched the color, a greenish hue by daylight. But when the first inner light was placed within, something strange, something deeper, a red that did not seem to come from the glass but from the space behind it. As if the cup had opened a door into another realm. The artisan may have paused, then, not from fear, but from knowing. This was not ordinary glass. This was something else. In Rome, such wonders were not necessarily explained. They were folded into the language of omen and symbol. A cup that changed color was not broken or unusual, it was blessed. It was marked, it had meaning. Perhaps the patron who commissioned the cup understood this. Perhaps they were part of a mystery cult, one of those hidden societies that trace their origins to the East, to Persia, to Egypt, to lands where gods walked in shadow. Or perhaps they were a philosopher, one who sought in light the mirror of the soul, or a healer who used colored vessels to influence the body's humors and spirits. Whoever they were, they must have known they were receiving more than a drinking vessel. They were receiving a threshold, and that threshold led not only into myth, but into memory. For by the time the Lycurgus Cup was made, the Roman Empire had already begun to fracture. The old religions were in decline. Christianity, once persecuted, was rising to dominance. The temples of Jupiter and Juno were falling quiet. Statues of Venus were buried or defaced. And yet, the cup, with its image of Dionysus, its glowing metamorphosis, defied that silence. It remembered. It carried forward a story the world was beginning to forget. In this way, it became more than artifact. It became witness, a witness to a world in transition, to a civilization at the edge of forgetting itself, to the artisans who disappeared into history's margins, leaving behind only the breath of their work. The Lycurgus Cup is one of the few voices left from that shadowed age. It does not speak in words. It does not proclaim dates or decrees. It glows. It glows, and in doing so, reminds us that history is not always loud. Sometimes, it is soft, subtle, carried in a shimmer of red that should not exist. As we look back through time, across fallen columns and broken aqueducts, it is easy to see only the ruins. But the cup tells us something else, that even in the shadows of empire, light persists, that even in forgetting, something is remembered, and that the deepest truths are not written in stone, but in the glow between shadow and flame. Let us sit now in that glow. Let us listen, not for facts, but for feelings. For, in the Lycurgus Cup, something ancient still stirs. Memory does not speak in straight lines and moves in ripples, in echoes, in sudden flashes of scent, of color, of sound, and when it surfaces, it is often incomplete, a shimmer rather than a shape. The Lycurgus Cup is such a shimmer. It does not tell us what to remember. It simply reminds us that something has been forgotten, for, in its shifting hues, from green to red, from calm to fire, we glimpse a memory not of events, but of experience, of how the ancients once felt the world. To the Romans, color was not background, it was foreground. It did not adorn their lives. It defined them. Every column once painted, every statue once alive with pigment. Temples gleamed with blues of lapis, the deep reds of cinnabar, the soft whites of crushed marble mixed with wax and oil. Their cities were not, as we see them now, pale and ruined, but vibrant, pulsing with chromatic life. And so, when a cup shifted color in their hands, It did not merely surprise. It resonated. It evoked something familiar, yet mysterious, a language of the senses that could not be written down. In this way, the Lycurgus Cup becomes a vessel of memory, not just of Rome, but of how we once saw the world, alive, awake, layered with meaning in every shade. But color, like memory, fades. Centuries passed. The pigments of the ancient world wore away beneath wind and rain. The statues grew white, though they had once been painted. The mosaics cracked, their blues dulling to ash. And still, the cup endured, its colors silent, waiting, hidden within. For the color of the Lycurgus Cup is not on the surface. It is within. It is embedded in the very structure of the glass, carried by particles so small they defy the eye, suspended like stars within a galaxy of molten memory. And here lies the true wonder. The cup remembers not with images, not with inscriptions, but with behavior. It remembers by transforming, by responding, by revealing a hidden self when light is placed behind it. What if memory itself works the same way? What if we do not recall things by calling them forth, but by shining a light through them? What if the past, like the cup, waits quietly inside us, unchanged, until something illuminates it? The Lycurgus Cup, then, becomes not just a relic, but a metaphor for how we carry history, for how the ancient world still lives in the depth of our gaze. To stand before the cup today is to enter into that metaphor. It rests in a museum now, behind glass, beneath controlled lights. But when the lights are dimmed, and the backlight ignites its core, the red returns. Not a harsh red, a soft, sacred glow. The kind of color that feels remembered. And in that moment, something stirs, not just in the room, but in you. A sensation, a memory you cannot name, as if you had once seen this before. Not in this life, but in another. In a time when temples breathed with incense, when cups glowed on altars, when stories were told not with ink, but with firelight dancing across carved figures. In this way, the Lycurgus Cup becomes a mirror. It does not reflect your face, it reflects your wonder. It reflects your longing. It reflects the part of you that still remembers how to see the world as sacred. Because the cup does not change with the light. It reveals what was always there. And in doing so, it invites you to remember yourself, not as a collection of data, of dates and facts, but as a vessel of color. As a being who once walked among myths, who once lit candles for invisible gods, who once looked at the night sky and did not need to understand it to be moved. The Lycurgus Cup does not explain the past, it holds it, and it offers it back to us, one shimmer at a time. So we sit before it, not as scholars, but as we do not ask it to speak, we let it glow. And in that glow, the memory awakens, not just of Rome, but of reverence. There was once a time when science and wonder were not separate languages, when the artisan and the philosopher walked the same corridors, when knowledge was not a fortress of equations, but a garden of symbols, and to learn was to listen, not just to the mind, but to the world's subtle murmur. The Lycurgus Cup was born in such a time. It is easy, in our modern world, to think of ancient science as primitive, to imagine that before the microscope and the equation, humanity wandered in darkness. But the cup suggests otherwise. It suggests that knowledge once wore a different robe, one woven of observation, intuition, and humility before mystery. The Romans did not speak of nanotechnology. They did not measure light in nanometers or describe particles in the language of wave interference. And yet, they created something that interacts with light in precisely those ways. The Lycurgus Cup proves that our ancestors were not ignorant of complexity. They simply expressed their understanding differently. They practiced a science of wonder, not because they lacked reason, but because they refused to separate it from meaning. This science did not dissect the world. It conversed with it. Glassmakers did not calculate the precise diameter of metal nano. They watched how certain powders shifted the color of flame. They tested how a different fuel, or a slightly longer cooling time, changed the texture of the glass. They did not chart their findings on scrolls of data, but committed them to memory, to muscle, to ritual. Each cup, each vase, each bottle was a whisper from the past, shaped by layers of inherited wisdom. To them, mastery was not knowing how something worked. It was knowing how to be with it, to stand beside the furnace with patience, to hear the voice of the fire, to feel when the mixture had reached the moment of becoming. In this way, the Lycurgus Cup is not just a technological artifact. It is a teacher. It reminds us that knowledge is not always loud, that understanding does not always arrive through numbers, but sometimes through silence, through watching the way the sun falls on a windowsill, the way a shadow shifts at dusk, the way red emerges from green when no one is looking. And that wonder is not a childish thing. It is a discipline. It is a way of remaining open in the face of the unknown. This is what we have forgotten. In our quest to explain, we have neglected to feel. In our eagerness to define, we have silenced the questions that cannot be answered, only honored. The Lycurgus Cup survives not just because of its material strength, but because of its symbolic power. It is a hymn in glass, a meditation cast in color, It has no inscriptions, no boast, no name carved into its side. It does not need them. It teaches not through instruction, but through presence. To stand before it is to remember what it feels like to be in the presence of something greater than the sum of its parts. And that is science, too. There is a wisdom in not knowing, in letting the red glow simply be, in letting your own mind soften, not with certainty, but with humility. The cup becomes, then, a sacred lens. Not to look at the past, but to look at ourselves, to ask, when did we stop allowing beauty to teach us? When did we begin to trust only what could be proven? And what have we lost in that shift? The forgotten science of wonder is not gone. It is simply sleeping, resting behind museum glass, waiting to be reawakened. Not by study, but by stillness. Not by information, but by imagination. Let us then, in this quiet hour, allow it to return. Let the Lycurgus Cup speak, not through facts, but through glow. Let it remind us that to wonder is not to be naive, but to be wise in a deeper way. To know that not all mysteries are problems to be solved. Some are poems to be read by firelight. And so we sit, watching as red emerges from green, as silence deepens into meaning, as an ancient cup teaches us, once again, how to see. There are stories carved in stone, stories painted on parchment, stories whispered in temple halls and echoing through cathedral domes. But the story held within the Lycurgus Cup is different. It is not fixed upon a single surface. It shifts, it breathes, it awakens only when touched by light. To understand this, we must return to the figures etched into its outer skin. The myth of King Lycurgus, the vines that ensnare, the gods who watch from the shadows. They are not merely illustrations, they are living shadows. Their meaning changes as the light changes. Their expressions deepen or soften depending on where you stand. Their gestures seem frozen, yet restless, as though a breath away from motion. The art of the cup is known as diet, a cage cup style where the outer layer of glass is meticulously carved away, to leave only a lattice of figures suspended around the inner vessel. It is a feat of balance, patience, and vision. To carve so finely without shattering the entire form is a marvel, and to do so in a way that does not obscure the myth, but reveals it, is something greater. It is storytelling in 3 dimensions. But unlike a book or a scroll, this story has no beginning and no end. It loops, it circles, each figure leads into the next, each vine entwines the next gesture. It is not read, but wandered through, and the light flickering torchlight perhaps, or the golden hush of a Roman oil lamp animates it. In daylight, the carvings may appear reserved, noble in green translucence, but when firelight finds them, they ignite. The king's fear becomes vivid. The vines pulse with crimson life. Dionysus, once a background presence, emerges in full subtlety, not shouting, but watching. This is a kind of sacred cinema, not of moving pictures, but of shifting light and shadow, a performance that requires no actors, only time and silence. The Romans knew the power of such stories. Myth was not something they believed in as one believes in a fact, it was something they participated in, something they lived. A cup like this, placed in the center of a dim room, would not simply be admired. It would be entered into. Its shifting hues would pull the viewer into contemplation, into memory, into myth. And here lies the deeper mystery. The Lycurgus Cup does not depict its story as a lesson. It does not say, this is what happened. It says, this is what might always be happening. The wrath of Lycurgus, the creeping vines, the presence of Dionysus. These are not past events. They are eternal motifs, archetypes, reminders of the cost of denying transformation, of resisting the sacred wildness of change. Perhaps those who drank from the cup or simply held it were meant to see themselves in its surface, to ask, what vines wrap around me unseen? What god do I deny out of fear? What color lies within me, waiting for the light? These are not historical questions. They are spiritual ones, and the cup asks them gently, not with words, with glow. It is not surprising that such an object survived. Even in times of chaos, certain things are spared, not because they are useful, but because they are felt. Perhaps the cup was hidden in a cloth of gold, or buried in the earth during a siege, or carried from hand to hand like a secret. It was not forgotten. It was protected, because the story it held, the carved myth, the shifting hues, was worth keeping. And now, centuries later, it asks us not to explain it, only to sit beside it, to turn it slowly in the light, to let its colors guide us into remembrance, of story not as entertainment, but as ritual, of art not as ornament, but as invocation, of objects not as things, but as companions on the road to meaning. So let us stay here a moment longer. Dreamer, let the figures whisper, let the vines twist, let the green fade to red, and in that deepening hue, let the story not end, but begin again. There is something ancient in the way glass looks at fire. It does not burn, it does not recoil. It waits, it responds, it watches. The Lycurgus Cup was born in fire, yes, but it was also shaped by it. tempered by the dance of heat and time. The glass we see today has been touched by more flames than we can count. The ones that created it, the ones that lit it in Roman temples, the ones that later burned cities while the cup lay hidden, perhaps buried, perhaps sealed away. The flickers of candlelight in medieval hands rediscovering the unknown, the pale electric glint of modern museum bulbs. And yet, despite all those encounters, the glass still glows, still remembers. It is easy to think of glass as fragile, but the Lycurgus Cup suggests otherwise. It is not just a survivor. It is a witness, a recorder of light, a surface upon which time itself has played. Glass watches differently than stone. Stone erodes, crumbles, it disappears. Glass remains, but changes subtly. It weathers, it mists, it whispers. Look closely at the surface of the Lycurgus Cup. See the tiny the small bubbles captured during the glassmaker's breath. The unevenness of the relief carvings. These are not flaws, they are signatures. The fingerprints of fire. And yet, within this living surface, something deeper dwells. Something almost aware. Because when the flame returns to the cup, it responds. Not mindlessly, not with repetition, but with nuance. The red does not just appear. It blooms slowly, thoughtfully, like a dream emerging from sleep. It is as though the cup recognizes the flame, as though it knows. We often forget that glass is a liquid paused in time, not a solid, not entirely. It is motion slowed to stillness. The atoms, though bound, still drift slowly over centuries. Glass is the memory of movement made visible. And in the Lycurgus Cup, that movement is light itself. When a candle is placed behind the cup, the reaction is immediate but never abrupt. The green yields to red with grace, like a curtain parting, like dawn revealing its second sky. And those watching do not merely see, they feel. A quiet, a breath taken and held, as if the glass had opened its eyes. This, perhaps, is why the cup continues to fascinate across ages. It is not just an example of ancient technique. It is a presence. It behaves, it waits, it speaks in light. And it demands that we slow down, that we return to the rhythm of flame. To sit beside a flame is to remember. It is to feel your thoughts soften, to watch shadows lengthen, to hear your heartbeat join the flicker's quiet pulse. The Lycurgus Cup belongs in this place, in the circle of firelight, in the hush of contemplation, not behind museum glass, beneath the buzz of climate control, but in silence, where its story can be heard not by the ears, but by the soul. Imagine, if you will, a night in ancient Rome, the city hushed, only the distant hooves of horses echoing through stone streets, a room lit by a single flame. At its center, the cup, no word spoken, no lesson taught, just the green of order, giving way to the red of mystery. A watching glass, a flame returning its gaze. We forget, in our rush to label an archive, that history is not always a tale. Sometimes it is a mood, a glance, a presence. And this cup, this ancient eye of glass, does not want to be explained. It wants to be witnessed, in flame, in stillness, in reverence. So let us place the flame back in its cradle. Let the light dance, let the red return, and as the cup glows, we, too, glow. With memory, with wonder, with the hush that comes when something beautiful refuses to be entirely known. At the far reaches of empire, where Roman roads became narrow tracks and Latin faded into the murmur of older tongues, the wind carried more than dust. It carried whispers, whispers of what Rome once was, and what it might still be beneath the ruins. These were lands where legions had marched but did not remain, where mosaics lay buried beneath moss, where temples cracked under vines in time. Yet in the stillness, something ancient lingered, not in strength, not in law, but in memory. It is here, on the whispering edge of empire, that objects like the Lycurgus Cup gained a new meaning. Because what survives at the margins is not always what the center deems worthy. What endures is what speaks softly, what glows. Perhaps the cup never left the heart of Rome. Perhaps it sat hidden in some senatorial vault, protected as regimes rose and fell. But we might also imagine another path, a journey outward, westward to Gaul, or north to Germania, east along the Silk Road, south to Egypt, cradled in linen and incense, a treasured gift, a sacred heirloom, a relic of imperial light brought to dimmer places. Imagine a Roman governor on the edge of the world, his villa perched on a misted hill, far from the marble columns of the capital, his days spent writing reports to emperors who no longer listened, his nights spent in reflection, a flickering lamp at his side, and beside the lamp, the cup. It reminds him of the center, of what was, but also, perhaps, of what cannot be destroyed. The empire may fracture, its borders may shrink, its gods may fall silent, but the cup glows just the same. It does not mourn, it does not boast, it simply responds. In the edge places of empire, such constancy would be powerful. It would be seen as a sign, a living thread to the old world, something that remembers when men forget. For empire is not only built by stone and steel, it is also built by myth, And when empires collapse, it is the myths that linger longest, reshaped, reimagined, but still whispering. The Lycurgus Cup holds such a myth, one of divine vengeance, of madness and transformation. But also, beneath the story, a deeper truth, that light cannot be commanded, that the sacred wildness of things will always find its way back, even in glass, even in silence, even on the edge of everything. There is something profoundly human about carrying beauty to the margins, about holding something fragile in the dark and believing it still matters. Perhaps this is why the cup was not broken, not melted down, not lost, because someone, somewhere, believed in its glow, believed that even if the roads fell to ruin and the statues crumbled and the gods were renamed, the cup would still speak, not with volume, with presence, with the quiet conviction of light in glass. When we, centuries later, look upon the Lycurgus Cup, we do so not as Romans, but as dreamers. We stand not at the center, but at the edge of understanding, of time, of memory. And the cup meets us there. It does not ask where we have come from. It does not ask what we believe. It simply glows, a whisper in a long night, a spark on the edge of empire. Let us sit with it now, as if around a dying fire. Let us share the silence it offers. Let the wind carry our questions. Let the light carry no answers. Only presence, only glow. There are silences that disturb, silences that ache with what was lost, what was unsaid. But there are other silences, gentler ones, the kind spun from twilight, from memory, from the Lycurgus Cup holds that kind of silence. It does not cry out to be noticed. It does not demand interpretation. It simply rests and glows and waits. Woven within its glass are threads of gold and silver, to find, to see, too ancient to trace. They shimmer not with wealth, but with wisdom. This is not the gold of conquest, melted from the crowns of fallen kings. This is alchemical gold, gold that has become invisible, sublime, integrated into form. We often speak of value as something counted, but here, value has dissolved into silence, into mystery, into light. The gold within the Lycurgus Cup does not shine in the way treasure shines. It bends light, it transforms perception. It hides until the right flame finds it, and then it sings in red. That song is ancient. It is not heard with the ears, but with the breath. The ancients understood that gold was more than currency. In their cosmologies, gold was the metal of the sun, the eternal, the incorruptible. It did not tarnish. It did not decay. It was the closest thing in the mineral world to the divine, and to suspend it within glass, to melt it into a medium of transformation, was an act of reverence. The artisans who made the Lycurgus Cup did not place the gold to show wealth. They placed it to show spirit. They wove it into silence, and in that silence, they entrusted something to us. Not a message, not a warning, a way of being with the past that is neither analogous nor nostalgia. Just stillness, just wonder. In the old alchemical texts, silence is often the final stage. After the fire, after the dissolution, after the transformation, there is only quiet. The kind of quiet that signals not absence, but arrival. The Lycurgus Cup rests in that space. It is complete. It needs no explanation. Its gold is not decoration. Its silver is not for sparkle. These metals were once coins, crowns, offerings. Now, they are light itself, and yet, even in their transmutation, they remain humble. The cup is not large. It does not glitter. Its magic is conditional. It waits for the flame. It waits for attention. It does not display. It reveals. And only in the quiet. This is the opposite of how we are taught to value. In our world, the loudest commands the room. The brightest steals the gaze. But the Lycurgus Cup teaches another path. The path of the hidden. The path of what only shows itself when you are ready to see it. This is the path of silence woven in gold. In that silence is a kind of trust. A belief that beauty does not need to perform. That truth does not need to explain itself. That the deepest knowledge arrives not with speech, but with stillness. And so the cup has waited through the fall of Rome, through the Dark Ages, through the rise of new empires, new gods, new tongues. It waited beneath the soil, or in a sealed chamber, or wrapped in velvet in a forgotten trove. We do not know. But it waited, and now it awaits still, in the glow of artificial lights, behind the pane of a display case. But if you kneel beside it, if you look not at it but into it, and let your eyes soften, let your thoughts settle, you may feel it again. The silence, the presence, the gold that glows from within. This is not metaphor, this is memory. Not the memory of facts or dates, the memory of how it feels to be near something holy. Not because it is sacred in name, but because it is sacred in silence. In the world of ancient objects, the Lycurgus Cup is rare not because of its craftsmanship, though it is exquisite, but because it does not speak in the language of conquest or utility. It speaks in hush. It says, "See me." Then forget what you thought you knew, and simply be. Let that be enough. And let the glow, slowly, speak what cannot be spoken. Beneath every surface lies a dream, Stone dreams of mountain, wood dreams of forest, and glass dreams of light. The Lycurgus Cup holds that dream more clearly than most, not in its form, but in its change, in the quiet miracle it performs when flame kisses its edge, for within its walls, embedded deep in its very body, is a dream that has outlived the empire that shaped it, a dream that does not fade when history fades, a dream that waits beneath the surface, dormant, until the right gaze stirs it awake. We have spoken of myth, of metal, of memory, but now we descend even further into the quiet place where objects stop being things and become moments, invitations, echoes. This cup, this vessel of red and green, is not merely a product of Roman hands. It is the trace of a vision, the kind of vision that cannot be taught, only followed. To hold a Lycurgus Cup, even in imagination, is to cup time in your hands, not a clock's time and different time, the time of breath, of fire, of color blooming in silence. For what is it, really, that lies beneath the surface of this glass? Not gold and silver alone. Those are only the bones. What breathes beneath is possibility. Possibility that the ancients saw with eyes we've forgotten how to use. Possibility that art could reveal something deeper than art. That matter, carefully shaped, could express something eternal. The dream of the Lycurgus Cup is not a dream of power. It is not conquest, not technology, not display. It is presence. It is the dream of stillness made visible. And it invites us, gently, always gently, to return to a way of seeing that does not rush, to sit, to wait. The figures carved upon the surface are not demanding. They are suspended mid-motion, caught in an eternal moment. The king's hand still raised, the vines forever twining, the god always just arriving. They are not in a story. They are the story. And that story lives in the glass, yes, but also in the light that moves through it. It is the movement of that light, slow, deliberate, warm, that brings the dream forth. Without the light, the cup sleeps. Not broken, just dreaming. And that is how history should be kept. Not as a thing locked in a box, but as a dream under glass, one that waits for flame, for breath, for wonder. The museum where the Lycurgus Cup now rests is quiet, climate-controlled, distant from the world that birthed it. And yet, the cup endures. It glows, still, not always visibly, not always dramatically, but for those who look with the right eyes, with the right heart, the dream reappears. The dream beneath the surface, a dream of transformation, of hidden fire, of memory stored not in words, but in change. It whispers we were here, we saw light differently. We shaped beauty not to control it, but to follow it. We dreamed of gods not as distant figures, but as patterns in the glass. And now, you dream too. You stand before this vessel not only as an observer, but as a bearer. The red that blooms is your recognition. The silence that surrounds it is yours to share. This is what the Lycurgus Cup asks of you. Not to know, but to remember. Not to explain, but to feel. Not to own, but to join. In the dream, in the light, in the hush beneath the surface. As the old world faded, as temples were emptied, altars forgotten, and the tongues of poets grew silent, certain things endured, not through decree or conquest, but through quiet resistance, through beauty too deep to be discarded, through mystery too sacred to be broken. The Lycurgus Cup is one such thing. It is not large, it is not golden in its finish, and yet it may be the last true cup of the gods. Not because it was used in divine ceremony, not because it was touched by the hand of a priest, but because it still carries, within its very form, the breath of an older understanding, one in which divinity was not separate from the world, but infused within it. To look upon the Lycurgus Cup is to see a world where gods lived in color, where stories wrapped themselves around every object, where a cup could speak of transformation without uttering a word. In many ways, Dionysus, whose myth adorns its surface, is the perfect patron for such an object. The god of ecstasy and baptism, the god who refused to stay in his temples, who walked among mortals, not as a distant force, but as a presence. He was a god of masks and wine, of vines and madness, but above all, he was the god of becoming. The Lycurgus Cup, too, is always becoming. Never fixed, never settled, green in the day, red by firelight. Neither is the truer self. Both are real. Both are necessary. This is the lesson the cup teaches. Transformation is not a betrayal of essence. It is its fulfillment. Perhaps the gods, in their final days upon the Roman altars, left behind certain signs. Not miracles, not warnings, but objects. Quiet things. Things that would survive the ages, not because they were powerful, but because they were beautiful. Because they still glowed. The Lycurgus Cup may be one of those signs. A final message. A last light. It bears no inscription, no proclamation. But that is the way of the gods who speak through mystery. They do not shout, they shimmer. They wait in the corners of vision, in the flicker of a flame, in the red glow of a vessel that should not shine the way it does. And when you notice, when you stop and feel the hush rising around you, then the message is complete. The last cup of the gods does not ask for worship. It asks for presence. It asks for silence. It asks that you remember not with facts, but with stillness. That you hold it even just in thought, the way one holds breath in a sacred space. Not too tightly, not too long, just enough to feel the wonder, just enough to feel the shift. And then to let it go. The world that created the Lycurgus Cup is gone. The forums are ruins. The priests are dust. The temples are stones beneath moss. But the cup remains, a single intact breath of that world. The last cup of the gods. Still changing, still glowing, still waiting. And if you listen closely, in the moment between green and red, you may hear it whisper, not words, not names, just the soft exhale of time remembering itself. A color that is also a memory, a shape that is also a prayer, a silence that is also a hymn. We do not know how many hands have held this cup. We do not know how many dreams it has carried. But now, in this hour, in this quiet, you have held it too. Not in your palms, but in your mind, in your soul, in the place where light touches memory and becomes meaning. Let us remain here. Let the glow continue. Let the gods sleep a little longer. There once was glass that dreamed, not of reflections, nor of windows, nor of being seen, but of color, of the journey between hues, of dwelling in the spaces where green softens into red, and red dissolves back into green. The Lycurgus Cup was such glass, not passive, not inert, but alive in the way that dreams are alive, shifting quietly beneath the surface of waking things. Most glass reflects the world around it, but this glass does something different. It transforms, and in doing so, it transforms the one who gazes upon it. What if glass could remember light? What if it held not only the shape of what passed through it, but the spirit? The Lycurgus Cup is not a lens. It does not clarify the world. It remakes it. It tells us that light is not constant, that vision is not static, that what we see depends not only on what is before us, but how we choose to look. This is the essence of dreaming. In dreams, a single object becomes many things. A doorway, a voice, a memory. Shapes shift, meaning flickers. Time folds inward. The Lycurgus Cup carries this same logic. The logic of the dream. Its myth, its structure, its impossible change in color. All speak the language of the in-between green and red, in between day and night, in between science and magic. When held to light, the cup does not glow uniformly. Its red is not even. There are swells and shadows, depth and glimmer. It seems to move, not physically, but spiritually, as though the glass is remembering its own birth, its time in the furnace, its shaping in ancient hands, the whispers that surrounded it as the figures were carved into its outer shell. This is not poetic metaphor alone. This is what glass does. It is a material of memory, not fixed like stone, not soft like fabric, but something suspended, something stretched. It remembers heat, it remembers time, and in the case of the Lycurgus Cup, it remembers color. Not the color it was given, but the color it chose when the right light touched it. We often think of dreams as immaterial, but what if dreams sometimes took form? What if the ancients, in their quiet devotion, gave their dreams to objects? The Lycurgus Cup may be one such dream, not dreamed by a single person, but by a lineage. A dream carried through apprenticeships, through breath on the blowpipe, through fingers guiding flame. A collective vision, solidified in silence. Its myth, the tale of Lycurgus and Dionysus, is one of conflict, of transformation, of surrender to a power larger than self. That myth, wrapped around the vessel, is not a story told from the outside. It is the cup's own dream. For what is the cup, if not a physical echo of Dionysus, ever-changing, masked in green, revealed in red, mortal in one light, divine in another? Glass is a strange medium for myth. It is fragile, yes, but it also endures. It survives where wood rots and parchment fades. It outlives paper and bronze. It can be broken by a single careless movement, and yet lasts thousands of years, untouched, glowing quietly beneath the soil. And unlike stone, glass holds the light, it holds it. And sometimes, it answers it. The Lycurgus Cup does not reflect us like a mirror. It reflects what we bring to it. If we come seeking history, we find craftsmanship. If we come seeking mystery, we find transformation. If we come in silence, we find glow. This is the secret of the cup's dream. It is not complete without you. You are the final light, the final breath, the final witness. And as you dream beside it, in this slow drift through time's forgotten galleries, the cup dreams with you. Its green softens, its red stirs, and somewhere, deep in the glass, the gold and silver whisper, not as metal, but as memory. A dream within a dream, held in fire, released by flame, and always waiting. Beneath every step we take lies dust, ancient, drifting, silent. Dust that once clung to the robes of priests and senators, dust that rested on the shoulders of stone gods, dust that settled on mosaic tiles glowing beneath Roman suns. It is easy to overlook this dust, to see it as nothing. But dust, too, remembers, and within it, sometimes, an echo stirs. The Lycurgus Cup may once have been covered in such dust, forgotten, entombed in some forgotten vault, wrapped in cloth, buried beneath years of silence. And yet, it endured. The dust did not take it. Time did not erase it. Instead, it waited, like an echo. It needed only to be heard again. We often imagine the fall of Rome as a singular event, a cataclysm. But in truth, it was a long unweaving. The edges of the empire frayed. The statues cracked. The aqueducts ran dry, slowly. And in this long silence, so much was lost. Libraries, rituals, knowledge, languages. Some things survived not because they were preserved, but because they hid. Because they whispered instead of shh. Because someone, somewhere, chose to keep them safe. Not out of obligation, but out of reverence. Perhaps the Lycurgus Cup passed through many hands during that slow fading. Perhaps it was carried by monks who did not understand its glow but felt its importance. Perhaps it lay beneath the floor of a crumbled villa, overlooked by those who sought only gold. Perhaps it sat on a shelf, forgotten, until one day a shaft of sunlight fell just right, and the red stirred once again. The dust around it was not dead, it held echoes. And now, when we see the cup, we do not see it alone. We see all the hands that touched it, all the eyes that beheld it, all the lips that whispered before it, all the fires that lit it. They are not visible, but they remain. They are the echoes in the dust. Modern science tells us that every particle carries memory, that vibrations, once made, continue forever, diminishing, yes, but never truly vanishing. What if the same is true for objects of wonder? What if the glow of the Lycurgus Cup carries within it not only gold and silver, but voices, not voices in sound, but in resonance, in feeling, when you stand before it or even imagine it in this quiet hour? Perhaps what you feel is not your imagination. Perhaps it is a response, an echo, meeting, echo, your wonder, answering theirs. In this way, the cup becomes a bridge, not only between light and color, but between moments, between centuries, between you and them, the dreamer of now and the dreamers of then. And what does the cup echo as it glows in its quiet? It echoes reverence, it echoes patience, it echoes the beauty of not rushing, of letting things become what they are, without explanation. In the swirling layers of dust that rise around lost cities, there are other artifacts, broken pottery, rusted coins, shattered frescoes. They, too, have stories, but few still speak. Few still glow. The Lycurgus Cup does not need to be reconstructed. It is whole. It does not need to be translated. It speaks through change, and in this, it becomes a rare kind of echo, one that grows louder, softer, clearer, warmer, the longer you sit beside it, as if time itself bows around it, not in submission, but in respect, in recognition, because not all relics are relics of war. Not all survivors carry wounds. Some carry light, some carry silence, some carry memory that does not crumble, but deepens. And so, when we speak of the Lycurgus Cup, we do not speak only of a cup. We speak of an echo in dust that refuses to vanish, a glow that refuses to dim, a whisper that refuses to end. Let us sit here a while longer, dreamer. Let the dust settle. Let the echo rise. There's a kind of light that feels personal. It does not blind, it does not blaze, it lingers. It warms the skin without burning. It moves like breath, like memory, like recognition. And when it touches you, something ancient awakens. Not in the mind, but beneath it. A sensation not of being seen, but of being known. The Lycurgus Cup holds that kind of light. It does not glow for everyone the same way. It does not shout its magic. Instead, it waits for your presence. And when your gaze is soft and your breath slows, it begins to answer. It is as if the light knows your name, not the name others gave you. The name that lives deep in your bones. The name you carried before words. When the Romans crafted this cup, they did not know you would be here, sitting beside it, centuries later. And yet in some strange and quiet way, it has waited for you, because this object does not belong to a single era. It belongs to any soul willing to listen, to anyone willing to stand still long enough to see not just what is visible, but what is felt. The green that melts into red is not only a play of light, it is a mirror of change, of the self you are in daylight and the self you become in contemplation, the one the world sees, and the one who watches from within. The Lycurgus Cup meets you in that in-between, in the shift between roles, between identities, between distractions. It is not a relic of the past. It is a companion of the present moment. We do not often let objects know us. We use them, we name them, we move past them. But sacred objects, like this cup, do not wish to be owned. They wish to be held, understood, respected, and in return, they offer something rare. Reflection without judgment, presence without demand, a warmth that doesn't fade, a glow that doesn't explain. In many ways, the Lycurgus Cup is the opposite of what our world asks us to be. It does not compete for attention. It does not change for validation. It simply is what it is. And in that quiet integrity, it invites you to remember the same truth in yourself. You, too, are not only what the world sees. You, too, have a light that changes with the flame. A memory of self that pulses beneath your roles, your titles, your masks. The Lycurgus Cup glows when lit from within. And so do you. This is not philosophy. This is feeling. This is the stillness that rises when something ancient brushes against the soul. You might never see the cup in person. You might never step into the museum where it rests. And yet, you have touched it. Here, in this moment, through breath and thought and listening. Its light knows you now. And in a way it always did. The cup has always waited for someone who would sit beside it, not as a collector, not as a scientist, but as a soul. And now, that soul is you. Let the red remain, let the green soften, let your own light flicker quietly beside it. This is not the end of a journey. This is the beginning of a new way of seeing, of remembering, of being. So let us rest here. You and the light. No need to speak, the cup knows. It always has time, when stretched to its furthest edge, begins to blur, not in chaos, but in stillness. There, in the quiet beyond clocks and calendars, beyond the rise and fall of empires, a single object remains, not towering, not thunderous, but glowing. The Lycurgus Cup, a vessel at the end of time. Not because it was meant to endure forever, but because it holds within its delicate shell the one thing that never fades. The mystery of presence. It has seen centuries pass. It has felt the hands of Rome, the hush of hiding, the reverent gaze of rediscovery. It has watched humanity build and unbuild. It has heard the tongues of poets and physicists alike. And still, it glows. Still, it waits. Still, it transforms. In this final hour of contemplation, we no longer ask what the Lycurgus Cup is. We no longer need to know how it was made or why it survived. We understand something deeper now, that the cup is not a question. It is a state of being, a metaphor made form, a dream suspended in molten time. Its dichroic dance between green and red, between calm and fire, between the mind and the soul, is not a trick of physics. It is a language, a way the past speaks through light. It does not ask for worship. It does not invite ownership. It simply offers its glow to anyone willing to sit with it, to anyone who still listens. And as we draw near the end of this journey, we realize that we, too, are vessels. That we, too, carry memory in our bones. That we, too, shift when the right light touches us. That in the deepest part of us, beneath the roles and stories and years, there is a place that still glows. Gently, steadily, eternally. The Lycurgus Cup reminds us that endurance is not loud. It is quiet. That beauty does not shout, it whispers. That truth does not insist. It waits. And that the sacred is not always what we are told it is. Sometimes, it is a cup made of glass, carved with forgotten myth, waiting in a silent room for a dreamer to return. You are that dreamer. And now, you carry its glow, not in your hands, in your breath, in your stillness, in your wonder. This vessel, this humble miracle, does not end here. It begins again, every time someone pauses long enough to feel it, to see the color change, to hear the silence ring, to remember what it means to sit with something unknowable and feel no fear. Only peace, only presence, only the glow of something ancient that feels impossibly familiar. So let it be. Let the flame soften. Let the red fold back into green. Let the vessel rest in its chamber of quiet light. You have walked the span of centuries. You have sat beside the gods. You have listened to the echoes in dust. And you have remembered the sacredness of wonder. The Lycurgus Cup remains, not behind glass, but within you, the vessel at the end of time. Now glowing softly in your soul, you have wandered far, dear dreamer, through the hushed corridors of vanished empires, past the breath of glass shaped by forgotten hands, into the myth-wrapped light where gods once lingered. And now, the journey quiets. We leave behind the chambers of Rome, the dust-covered footsteps, the flame-flickered walls, but we do not leave empty, for something has followed you out of the past, not in weight, but in wonder. The glow of the Lycurgus Cup now lives quietly within you, a memory not of information, but of feeling, of reverence, a beauty that asks nothing and offers everything. So, as you drift now into sleep, into rest, into the soft country beyond thought, let that glow guide you, let it warm your breath, let it soften your heartbeat. You have sat beside a vessel that holds more than wine, more than light. It holds the echo of presence, the kind of presence that whispers across centuries, not to teach, but to remind that silence is sacred, that change is divine, that the soul recognizes truth, not by knowing, but by feeling. And now, in the dark behind your eyelids, may you see that glow one more time. May it shift from green to red, and from red to dream. Before we part, if these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known with a gentle like, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing, to continue these nightly journeys through history's forgotten light. And tell us, softly, from which corner of the world you listened tonight, so that the dreamers may find each other across the quiet oceans of time. Good night, fellow traveler. The past has not ended. It only sleeps in tonight. It sleeps beside you.